name is Larry Lee Underwood. I'm from Saudi Daisy, Tennessee. I'm 80 years young. I went into basic training December of 1965 and served until December of 1967. I had basic training at Fort Benning, then 2 weeks leave, followed by reporting to Fort Pope, Louisiana, and after that, Fort Knox. And from there, shipped on the next to the last troop carrier, the SB Buckner, to Germany, and was stationed at Kitzingen, Germany for the next 18 months. I was a tank mechanic, and so on the M60.
Okay.
The training we got at Fort Knox was just to exchange the larger components, such as starters, other items that the motor itself took. And so I remember being in Germany, we would compete from time to time about disconnecting the engine from the tank itself, the body of the tank, and then setting it out and get it running, and then compete with other companies around how long it took to take those out. The motor had quick disconnects when you get into the hull of the tank, easy access to quick disconnects to the engine itself, and just take the lid, I don't know what you would call it. We'd call it a hood on a car, on a tank, but take it off, and then the engine is exposed, and a few things that you'd disconnect to the train that would drive the sprockets on the tank and lift it out by an M88. Was our particular vehicle that that mechanics used for all of that. It was a wrecker designed to retrieve tanks. And so it was a combat series tank. We had other vehicles as well. We had APC, Armored Personnel Carrier, and we had the M151 little Jeep, 3/4 ton truck, and we also had a deuce-and-a-half, 2.5 ton truck that we had to take care of. We had a total of 18 tanks that had to be combat ready. And so we had to do maintenance and live fire from time to time at Grafenwehr and Hornsfeld. We'd spend sometimes 2 months. I remember one time in January and February, spending those 2 months in training, in maneuvers, and of course we was there as mechanics if anything went wrong with those vehicles. Perhaps those times in Grafenwehr, the coldest months of the year. Germany, I arrived there in the month of August when I first went there of 1966, and went in summer dress for the Army, which was khakis, and it was cold then, and so January and February was very cold. But we spend those 2 months in the field and trying to stay warm. During those times, the tankers themselves were inside, where they had heat from diesel heaters on the inside. But those of us in support, we sometimes would have to stand behind the tank just to stay warm in the exhaust fumes of the engine. And those were memorable moments. There was many things that happened. One thing there was another fellow soldier, Neil Brewer is his name, and he and I once were working, we were back in the motor pool at this particular time. We were changing a sprocket on the M88, and they had the boom raised. And with most military, there's no such thing as if it's storming outside, you find a safe place. And so we continued to work on it, but the boom served as a lightning rod, and Neil and I was on cheater bars trying to get the sprocket nut to be broken off of it so we could remove the sprocket and replace it. And the lightning bolt hit the boom and ran through the vehicle, and then of course we're on the ground, and ran through us, and no permanent damage, but we asked the person on the inside of the M88, please let the boom down. Also, I think before we left there that America was probably owing some Germany some money because of when we'd mischievous. You got to remember, I was 20 years old, 21 years old, and in that time and that age, goodness, you put someone like myself that came up just working for less than $1 an hour, and you put them in a vehicle that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it's got all the power that it has, and you can button the hatch and run trees over. You can chase rabbits. You can go out and do donuts in comrades' fields, and so anyway, and so those are some of the things we did do. Oh, one interesting thing for me, when we were out in the field, I remember well that there were many wild pigs in that vicinity, and I crawled under a 3/4 ton truck to be able to sleep that night. And so I remember that was cold, sleeping bag, and just get in the sleeping bag and get underneath a 3/4 ton truck to spend the night. But partly because the hogs were in the area. I was a part of the 64th Armored Unit, 15th Infantry, and we're just mechanized infantry. I just, it was before the draft was discontinued. And so I hadn't any thoughts about going into the military. I graduated in 1965 from high school, went to work at a local combustion engineering, and never thinking that just a few months later I'd get an invitation from the government to be drafted into the Army. And so I was willing. My father was part of World War II, and so I was willing. I look back on that now and wonder why I didn't chat more with him. I guess it was because of youth and other things in life that you just didn't spend that much time with your elders and your parents, and regret that now. But anyway, went off to, first of all, just to physical, and then past that, probably the first time I'd passed anything related to testing. And so past that, and then formal induction into the service. And I remember having long hair and being asked if you want to keep the hair. And of course, everybody wanted to keep the hair. And so they just sliced it all off with as close to the skin as they could and laid it in your lap. And this was probably, this could have been 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't remember. And they said, oh, now and then you can get you some good sleep. And so then about 4 or 5 o'clock, you're awakened, and you're sent for your clothing, and they ask what size do you wear, and they just pick one, toss it at you, and nothing ever fits, and you're off. And then you get to Fort, in my case, Fort Benning, and we're all hustled off and made to stand close ranks, and then called everything in the book that you never had been heard of. And so my background, not ever being involved in that, anything like that, it was It was terrible. I thought I had gone to purgatory. One thing during basic training, I'm sure true with everybody. One person messes up, everybody pays. And so somebody messed up one night during basic training. I don't remember the issue, but it's 2 o'clock in the morning and we had nothing but undies on. And this is in December. I had basic training December and January, February. And so we were put out in formation, and then we had to lay on our backs, and we had to kick like we were doing a dying cockroach. I remember that. At the time, I thought, man, this is merciless. But now then I look, and it was so much fun. And so there's a lot of things. I learned so much through those 2 years of appreciation for the country I live in, for authority, for disciplinary actions, chain of command, following orders, doing as you're told. Just learned a lot. It helped me to grow much in those 2 years, more than I had in the prior 19 years. I'd like to tell you this. Please. Yeah. I met the love of my life in October of 1965, and before I was to go away, I asked her if she would marry me. And so we got married December the 11th, 1965. And I had to report for duty on December 21, 1965. So we had 10 days. And then I finished with basic training. And I get my next orders. And I didn't know what an MOS was. I didn't have a clue. If they told me, I must have been sleeping through that class. I don't remember. But so I had not learned well enough yet to know that I couldn't take my young wife with me to Fort Pope. And so time comes and we just load up and go to Fort Pope, and there's a Leesville, I believe is the name of it, or Leesburg, one of those, right outside of Fort Pope. And we were going to live together off base. And when I did report for duty, they told me, no way, you don't have the rank to do that. She can stay, but she'll have to stay there off base by herself. And we said, no, that's not going to work. And so we had very few hours before I would be considered AWOL. And so we jumped the car and came from Fort Pope back to, at that time, Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia. And we were coming through, this is before the interstate. That's a long time ago. And so we're coming through Birmingham on a 2-lane road, and just outside of Birmingham. This is very early in the morning, way before daylight. And we're doing about 90 miles an hour. And see an approaching vehicle. And I thought, man, those lights are getting closer all the time. And I said, we're doing about 90, and I don't know. And so he got close enough, and then the lights came on, and he pulled me over. And he walked up to the driver's side of the car, and I had my dress uniform hanging in the window. And if that's not the reason, I don't know what the reason other would be. It's the Vietnam era. And then he walked up. I don't remember him asking for my driver's license or anything. No, and he just saw that uniform perhaps, and then all he said was, did you know that you have a tail light that's out? I said, no, officer, I didn't know that. He said, you might want to stop then at the next station and see if you can get a fuse to go in that and get that fixed. And so we just wrapped a gum wrapper that was foil around it and went on home. And I had to stand by, catch a plane, flew back into Louisiana, I forgot exactly the city that I was in. And I'm on standby. And so there's still a seat on the plane. I got on, and then somebody who owned that seat came and they kicked me off the plane. And then I had to grab a cab back to Fort Pope. And I asked the cab driver, would he take me to Fort Pope? And he said, how much money do you have? And I foolish me, I told him exactly. And he took exactly that much to get back to Fort Pope. And I guess I got back at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning and had to get up and report for duty right away. And so that was interesting. And then my precious wife and myself did stay together for the next 8 weeks of training in Fort Knox. We lived in Radcliffe, Kentucky. And then trusted a fellow soldier there with because once we were on base, we shipped out and trusted a fellow soldier with the car to carry it back to my wife. And at that time, she wasn't driving that. And my sister came and met her there, drove her home. And so, interesting. And then he told us, be sure to look at the Statue of Liberty when you go by, because you may never see it again. That was 9 days on the Atlantic, and before we got to Bremerhaven to process in, from there to Wurzburg, and then to Kitzingen for the next 18 months. None that except you're talking about people showing appreciation for your service. When I came home, we were required to travel in our uniform. I don't remember at any place, whether it be bus station, whether it be an airport, I don't remember anybody walking up to me in uniform and saying anything to me about, sure, thank you for your service. And so from that time until this time, though, people have become more aware of the importance of our men and women in uniform. And I have often, I can wear a hat, I can wear anything that identifies me as a veteran. And I've had more than once, young people even, young men, just to see that. And they truly express their appreciation for service. And I think it's normal. I remember once going from Lowe's in Hickson, and the cashier just putting her hand on her heart. And she said, I truly appreciate what you did in serving the country. And I said, I would gladly, if able, do it again. And so I love this country. I love America. I got a patriotic heart, and it's been more so, and made more so by being a veteran. Did you throw grenades while you was in the service? We threw grenades, and they're not that light, you know. And I was just at that time I was 20. Well, I hadn't even reached 20, 19. I was still 19. And you pull a pin, and they throw you, and you toss, and you got to get down in the foxhole. And they said, "What do you wear panties?" Because instead of throwing it, I just lobbed it. I think they wanted to holler 4.